Let's do a demonstration of what a neuro-emotional technique treatment looks like. This is my husband, Adam, who's going to be my patient for today. And let's just look at the muscle test and how this works. So all Adam is doing is keeping his arm up and meeting the pressure as I put some downward pressure into his arm. And he's nice and stable here. But what we're going to do is we're going to have him say the phrase, "I'm okay even if I make mistakes."
I'm okay even if I make mistakes.
And we get a temporary drop in his arm. As he keeps saying that phrase,
I'm okay even if I make mistakes.
I can find acupressure points that will change that test. And for him, lung and large intestine shows up. So let's check those emotions related to lung and large intestine. Let's look at the concept of grief, concept of dogmatically positioned. And I'm testing between each of these concepts of these emotions to see how his body responds to these ideas of these feelings. Let's look at the concept of crying, concept of compelled to neatness, concept of defensive. Let's look at the concept of you're defensive. And now this takes a little bit of interaction with the patient too, and now the patient has to do some work. So Adam, how would you tie together the idea of being okay making mistakes related to you're feeling defensive?
As a previous military person, I think that it was not okay to make mistakes in the defense of our country.
So let's look at the concept of this idea that it wasn't okay to make mistakes defending your country. And what's the worst part about that feeling?
The lives are on the line, that there's loss. That's possible.
So let's look at the concept of this possible loss that could happen if mistakes were made. Yeah, so let's look at the concept of an original event sometime in the past where there was a similar feeling of defensive related to a lot being on the line with potential loss. And let's look at the concept of that original event when you were between the ages of conception to 10 years old. And I test between each of these age categories, concept of that original event between 10 and 20 years old, 10 to 15 years old, 15 to 20 years old, and we're hot on the trail at 15 to 20 years old. So let's look at the concept of that original feeling at 15 years old, at 16 years old, at 17 years old, at 18 years old. And so now we see that 18 years old is connected with this stress pattern. So Adam, where were you and what were you doing at 18 years old?
Going through military basic training and joining into the Air Force.
So was there anything at that time where you can see those feelings of defensive related to potential loss?
Yeah, definitely. There was a lot on the line at that point, just in training.
So then we can go back and check these ideas that were related to this stress pattern. So let's look at the concept of defensive, and he's strong now. Let's look at the concept of that feeling of a lot of pressure and that potential loss that could happen. And let's look at the concept of that feeling at 18 years old where there was that defensive feeling and that feeling of a lot of pressure and that potential loss if things could go wrong. And then we have him go back and try that original statement, "I'm okay even if I'm imperfect."
I'm okay even if I'm imperfect.
And his arm is now strong, which gives us an indication that his physiology has shifted out of that sympathetic state from fight or flight into a more relaxed state so that his body isn't triggered and stressed so much by this idea of being imperfect and not wanting to make any mistakes. And so that's what the NET technique looks like, just a quick example. And as we go through multiple treatments with somebody, at Windmill we take 20 minutes to do NET with somebody. And as we go through multiple sessions, we're able to dig deeper into some of those core issues so that we can have him say other statements like, "I'm okay making mistakes. I'm okay if others judge me for making mistakes. It can be good for me to make mistakes." And we can put other statements surrounding these core stress patterns to help really clear the stress related to them so that we can stay more present and reduce some of these triggers that we experience so the body is no longer experiencing that stress by these ideas.